the Arabian Racehorse Podcast with Debbie Burt, Gary Cape
and Stephen Molyneux.
Another edition of the Arabian Racing Podcast. I'm joined this week by Stephen Molyneux.
Hi there, Debbie. How are you?
Yeah, all good. We've got a special guest this week. Is Piers Dargan from Equine Record, who generally edits all our programs and puts them together for us. He's also a member of the BlackRock Racing Syndicate, and we're going to be talking to him about the syndicate's first Arabian racehorse and their first runner in a Arabian group race, which is a Derby on Saturday. So hi, Piers.
Hi, Debbie. How are you?
Yeah, all good here, all good. And later on, we'll be joined by Gary Capewell. He's en route from one of his other jobs, and he'll be joining us to obviously talk about the Derby, but also talk about the race that we've just had at Haydock, where he was commentating. So if we move on straight away to the Derby, it's the UAE President's Cup, who've been sponsoring our Derby at Doncaster now for, this will be the 6th year. We've got a record number of 9 runners in the field. This is the biggest field we've had since the race has been run at Doncaster, and since the UAE Cup have resumed their sponsorship of the race. So obviously that's very exciting for us. Not quite as many French runners as we've had in some years, but they're 2 good horses. They're both winners of group races. If we just start with a little comment from Stephen, what's your initial reaction to the runners that we've got declared?
Yeah, well, it's, as you say, good to see a fairly big field for the race. Obviously, a few of the locally based trainers have probably hoped that the French didn't travel over in mass as they have done in years gone by. But yeah, as you say, the 2 French horses that are here are both very good, particularly Abes. You know, he's obviously one of the best of his generation in France. He's probably going to be very difficult to beat. If you look through his form, he's obviously got a couple of group race wins to his name already. The twice that he's stepped up to the highest level, Group 1s, he's run very well. Likely beaten by a very good horse at Chantilly last time in the Qatar Derby, but in turn he was a good way clear of the rest. So pretty much every one of his 6 runs so far, he's more than good enough to beat his 8 rivals on Saturday. But you know, it's a horse race. He's had to travel over from France. You know, he's maybe a little bit had a bit more racing than some of the locally based horses this season as well. But in truth, it is going to be a very, very hard to see him beaten. He sets a very high standard, and like I say, it's not just on 1 or 2 of his runs. It's pretty much all of his starts so far is a high level of form. And
looking back through that form, you're absolutely right. That's, you know, he's had 5 runs in group races. Pretty much ever since obviously he made his debut at Toulouse last year, and he was very unlucky, I think, to get beaten by Hadi de Carrère at Saint-Cloud in the 3-year-old race last year. But the weather there was absolutely desperate, and I think, you know, if I had to pick holes in his form, the only thing that I would say is all his wins have come on soft ground. At the moment in this country, we've got unseasonably good weather for Doncaster. And at the moment, the prediction is for good to firm, although there may be the odd shower. So that would be a marginal concern, but I just think that his class would probably see him through any ground concerns. He's by TM Fred Texas. And actually, he's one of TM Fred Texas's best sons. Which also include Marid, who was also very good on soft ground, and a horse called Methgal, he won our juvenile Group 3 on Dubai Day, and which was actually on good to firm. Again, a rarity for those races in this country. And he also won the international race over a mile as part of the Emir Sword Festival. That obviously would have been on quick ground. So, you know, looking for things to pick holes in, possibly the ground would be my only worry for him.
Yeah, I suppose it's almost a bit of an unknown for a few of them, really, isn't it? Not too many of the locally based horses would have run on it anyway. A lot of the French races just take place on an easier surface, as you mentioned. But as we saw to a degree at Haydock last week with Bayan Athbar, I suppose it did prove a bit of a leveler, didn't it? That the firmer ground on that occasion, she only just overcame it. So I suppose, yeah, you're right. It would be a nagging concern, and perhaps ally that with the fact that he's had to travel over. But as you say, it is kind of nitpicking picking holes in what is a very good record. He's proven over the trip. Olivier Pellier, top man on board, is making the trip over, and he should really maintain the French dominance in the race. The other one that's going to travel over with him, Orion, has not achieved anywhere near as much in France so far, and his kind of form has come to life outside of France, hasn't it? The last couple of starts, he's won a couple of times in Belgium, and we kind of know the listed and group class races over there wouldn't compare to the sort of French level. He's also finished third in an Italian group too, and the thrice he's raced in France, he's come up short. So Orion's improvement has come elsewhere in Europe, whereas Abez is, one of the best 4-year-olds in France. So, it wouldn't be at all surprising if those two did dominate.
Of course. And the only thing, going back to the ground again, Arion's wins have come on good ground. So there's possibly an argument there to say that might bring them closer together. His Group 2 placing in Italy, that was over this trip, and he was a length and a half behind Heian, who is a horse obviously that we know a bit more about, and also former winner of this race obviously 2 years ago. So that represents sort of bringing the French form together. But Heian's he's not the easiest horse in the world. He's certainly considered by his trainer Freddie Sanchez to be a little bit on the tricky side. As you say, if the horse had shown a lot more at home, I think probably he would have contested more races at home. So it's fair enough that they've gone in search of black type in, as you say, some of the countries with less strong form, which of course would be Belgium, and you have to admit certainly this year in this country as well. I think one thing that's a really interesting little tidbit really is that the dam of Arian Kista Gazal and the dam of Abez Rakia, they've both won the President of the UAE Cup when it was run in this country at Ascot on King George Day. And when those mares won those respective races, they were partnered by Olivier Pellier and Jean-Bernard Hakim in those respective races. So there's a nice little bit of full circle history there for this race for those two.
Yeah, interesting stats behind it. And look, Olivier Pellier presumably would have had the option to ride in France on Saturday, a couple of group races there. So the fact he's come over to ride at Doncaster, and I just don't see him being beaten really. I know, like we say, strange things can happen with Arabians. There'll be a big crowd, probably as big a crowd as any of them have ever raced in front of before, but probably it won't be enough to affect him. And it's gonna take a big step up from one of the others to beat him.
Yeah, it certainly will. And Abez's run at Chantilly in the French Arabian Derby, he did get caught a little bit in a pocket, and he did have to sort of chop and change. And by the time that he got free, the winner, Hogarth de la Douce, had absolutely flown. So certainly he could probably have finished a lot closer to the winner on that day, even if he hadn't got his head in front. So it's certainly he's an exciting young horse to watch, and one for the future. And I think he'll probably uphold the form of this race in the following the rest of the year. All our previous winners, I think the last 4 winners have all been French Derby winners who've come over. Obviously, Hogarth is going to be aimed at the Qatar Arabian World Cup and has skipped this race. But I certainly think that Abez is a worthy contender, and he certainly looks the one to beat. Of the other horses down the field, we've been joined by Piers Dargan, as I mentioned earlier. He represents the Black Rock Racing Syndicate, and they have Altar in the race. Piers, could you give us a few thoughts on the excitement that awaits you on Saturday?
Yeah, no, I say, listening to you both talking about it's going to take some performance for a horse to beat the French Raiders. Well, hopefully one can dream, and hopefully if it is going to be one of the local horses, that it is Altar. So look, we were really, really happy with our first race in our colours in Chepstow. I think based on her previous form from last year, she's really come on since she's gone to James's. It seems like this hopefully will be the perfect time for her to put in another big race for us, and we'll have a big contingent coming over from Ireland and from across the UK to come and watch. And really, we're just so excited to to be involved. It is our first involvement, obviously, in Arabian racing. It shows exactly the opportunities that come, being able to be at such a big day at Doncaster. And we really can't wait, and we're just happy to be involved.
Super. And what obviously you've got an involvement through Equine Medi Record, and you've done sterling work with these podcasts over the last couple of years. What was it that really tipped the balance for you to get involved in Arabian racing?
I just think it's something where I wanted to learn more. Obviously, with listening to yourself and Gary and Stephen, I've started to learn about the sport. And really, I think the next way to really kind of get involved is to get involved in ownership. So it was just finding the right opportunity. And I had mentioned it to a number of people, that we were kind of looking at it and seeing, especially now that it's part of the professional industry this year, integrated in with the BHA, that there would be opportunities that would come up. And this one obviously was just one we couldn't let go, where Shadwell said that they're willing to lease some horses. And then it was really about kind of dipping the toe in the water. We've obviously leased Autar, and then now with everything, it's very rare, no matter what type of racing, where plans actually work out. So we were hoping that she'd run a great race her first time out, and that she would be competitive going into the Derby. And so now that it has, we really now are looking at kind of what we do afterwards, and probably head down. I've already got the flights booked down to the Arabian Sale in France. So look, we'll see. But it's early days. It is very unique. I don't know if you've seen, but in the past couple of days, the Irish racing press, it's a story that's kind of come to life over here, being the first syndicate to be involved in Arabian racing from Ireland, just because it's not really a code of sport that we have here in Ireland. I know there was a UAE President's Cup in Ireland in years gone by with the Guineas weekend at the Curragh, but that I believe stopped in around 2014. So it's just nice to kind of get that involvement back. And it's been interesting. I've been down, speaking to various people in the industry, and it has piqued their interest. It's a unique story. And so it's just great to be involved.
And can you just tell me a little bit about the membership of your club and how many are in the syndicate and their backgrounds?
Yes, so we represent a secondary school, so a high school here in Ireland called Blackrock. Be quite well known, one of the kind of the largest schools here. It would have a past pupils union, active union within the thousands of members. They're dispersed throughout the world. Obviously, a big chunk of them are in Ireland, but there is a very large contingent in the UK. So when we had our first thoroughbred racehorse with Joseph O'Brien, which went very well and won the Microsoft Cup and went to Royal Ascot, I was approached by the head of the Blackrock Union in the UK, Dara Connell, and he said, look, we have thousands of people here, members here, who've seen what's happened. They want to get involved. Could we get a horse in the UK? And so I, before COVID, took Dara down to Newmarket, and we went to James Ferguson for the thoroughbred side, but we also then went into James Owen. So we went in and we said to James Owen, look, if there is an opportunity where we could, because this is new to us, have an entry point where we could learn about the sport, have our first involvement, and then kind of go from there and look to get more fully involved, could you please let us know? And it just so happened that this opportunity came and we grabbed it. And it's just been so great that everything's worked out. And we've kind of got our big day out, because that's what we care about. These are people who love the sport. They care more about going to the races, meeting up with old friends, meeting up with people from school that they haven't seen in years, and being able to share an experience with them. And that's kind of what we do. And it's going to be a really great weekend, regardless of the result. I'm hoping, of course, for a very big run from Autar. Of course I am. But, regardless, we're so happy to be going up and being able to share that with friends and family.
I think it's also quite important, actually, in the scheme of this race, to note that obviously, although the field is undoubtedly dominated by Sheikh-owned horses, even with the runners from France, we've got a lot of horses in this race now which are owned in partnership. So Arian is actually a partnership horse. There's that split 50 and 25% shares in the ownership there between the stud, I think it was raised at, and and two other owners, while Sahis is also a partnership, and of course your own partnership with BlackRock Racing. How many, as obviously you've been involved with syndicates for some time now, how are you finding in these strange kind of, not exactly post-COVID, but things are obviously more different to how they used to be. Do you think that syndicates are a positive step forward and a good way now that racing's going through some, in general, is going through some challenging times, and I think probably syndicates is a positive move. Sorry.
Yeah, well, even if you look at racing generally, in terms of ownership, the rising numbers of new owners are in syndicates. I just think it's the perfect entry point for people who like the sport but don't really know too much about it, wouldn't be experts, would have other jobs. They follow the sport for the love of the sport, so they don't feel confident enough to go and potentially buy, a horse or buy a large share in the horse, but they want to learn. And so it's the perfect entry point for them then to come in, put 500 euros, 1,000 euros, 2,000 euros into a horse, learn from that. And I've already had people from my syndicates go off with 2 or 3 other members and buy horses by themselves. So I think that's kind of the main thing with the syndicates. Number one, it makes it affordable it's an affordable entry point for people to get into the sport. Number two, it means that they can build their confidence and potentially go out and buy horses on their own. And then 3, I've had owners from the older generation of BlackRock alumni who have been sole owners in their own right. And the big thing they say is you get to share it with friends. You get to share it with family and everyone, rather than it just being you and celebrating there by yourself. You got 50 of your friends from school. It's like a little mini reunion party that you get to share this experience with. So I'm a big believer that it is the future of the sport, where you see, the healthy kind of racing industries. Syndicates are normally a big factor in that. And it's just because it's that pathway into ownership, where it just means that you don't have to be, a sheikh or a very high net worth individual to get involved. You can have 62 young men coming out of college, putting a couple, £100, £1,000 together and racing against the best. And isn't that kind of what the greatness of our sport is that you can have those stories and, those people coming together and be able to compete against the best. You can't get that in any other sport. It wouldn't happen. If we went and bought a football team, we're not competing against Man City, I can tell you that.
Yeah, I think it's I think it's really good and a really positive move forward for the sport. At the end of the day, I think as I said, all of racing is facing challenges, and certainly Arabian racing is facing those same challenges with seeking sponsorship and trying to get new people involved. And I think it's a really positive move. Bringing in so many new people in the way that you are, I think is fantastic. How many people are coming on Saturday?
We'll have, I think from our side, we'll have around 20. We've got to just see with ferries, our problem, COVID joys of all the travel and stuff, but I think that should be around that. So look, it will be a great day. And, it's something where I guess I haven't been racing at a festival now for 2 years, so it's going to be an amazing feeling to actually get to a festival where there's kind of as close to normal then as it has been for the last 2 years. So I can't wait for that, and I know a lot of the guys can't either. And
we're now joined by Gary Capewell, who has just joined us from. And where have you just come from, Gary?
East Oxfordshire. I've had to go I'm renting my house out at the moment, so I've just had to sort a few bits and pieces out, get the old ears lowered as well, and yeah, good to go.
Excellent. And so Gary, in your absence, I was just saying that we talked about Abez and Arian, who will be running in the UK Arabian Derby, and also we touched a bit on Ortar. Your thoughts on the race?
Yeah, I mean, Abez is a clear pick, isn't he? He's over a stone clear on the ratings. He's going to have to massively underperform not to win. He's got the best bits of form in the book. I mean, obviously he was second in the French equivalent, and he's a Group 2 and a Group 3 winner. I don't think he's the type of horse that's going to win by sort of 10, 12 lengths or anything ridiculous like that, or even half of that, to be honest. I don't think he's that type of horse. I should imagine Olivier Perriot is going to want to try and play play him as late as possible and win as easily as possible. And even if he's to run half a stone below his best, in truth, it should still probably be enough. So he's clearly been staved with this race in mind, hasn't he? And, you know, he's going to take a good deal of beating. The other French horse has obviously improved quite a bit, Arion, since, you know, those runs in France earlier on in the horse's career. Obviously, you know, went to Italy, won a Group 3 race there, and has won the last 2 starts in Belgium over different trips as well. So clearly improving. Again, I think it will need another fairly big step forward to be beating Abez, but it's interesting that they deem him worthy enough to come over and take his chance. But, you know, to be honest, I think the favourite's going to be very, very difficult to beat.
Yeah, and Arion's form did get a small boost at the weekend. Lamat Chamel, who was runner-up to it in Belgium, won the race in Baden-Baden, yet another UAE President's Cup there. But again, the quality of that race as to opposed to the level of racing that Abez has been competing at, I think, as you say, he's going to need quite a lot of improvement to put it up to that one on Saturday. Yeah,
definitely. I mean, he's only had a handful of starts. I mean, most of them have obviously, you know, it's only their 4-year-old careers, so they've only had sort of a handful of starts. Most of them, they're open to still plenty of improvement. But Abez just looked a quality horse last year when he was running in France as a 3-year-old, and obviously, you know, he started his season off with a fairly impressive win on his seasonal return, and he's that form. I mean, he went into the French Derby as the favourite, I think, didn't he? And okay, you know, he's beaten by a decent horse, but in turn, he's finished nicely clear of the others. As I say, I don't think he's the type of horse that's going to win by a massive, massive margin. It just doesn't strike me as that type of horse. I think he's a very, very good horse, but again, I can't imagine he's going to be winning by a fair sort of margin here. Strictly speaking, on the figures, he probably should do, but he doesn't really strike me as that type of horse. So I remember his dam, Rakia. It was a decent horse herself. Obviously, he's a homebred, this horse, out of an Oncarn mare. She was good. She was a group, but I think she did win a Group 1, or she certainly placed in Group 1s, but she had a little bit of a quirk about her as well. And I think some of those characteristics may have been transformed to this lad as well. Like I say, I don't think he's the type of horse that's going to do a huge amount when he gets to the front, with a big crowd there on Saturday, and with a bit of history in the race as well. I'm sure Olivier Perrier will be keen to play it as late as possible.
Yes, and so if we look, obviously we've talked about Autar a little bit, but Gary, if we move on to the Shadwell contingent split between Phil Collington and James Owen.
Yeah, I mean, well, Alajab and Algarni both ran, obviously, last week. Alajab was 6th and Algarni last of all, and didn't show a huge amount, was slowly away and just didn't look completely straightforward, it's probably fair to say. Alajab, we'd seen better from him, better from that particular horse on the UK debut at Chelmsford, when he'd made just about all of the running to win. But it took him a while to get in on last week. So whether they'll have to put him in first or not, I'm not sure now on the back of that. He made an effort, but he soon sort of dropped away really in the end, didn't he? Okay, you know, it was a fairly competitive Group 3, but this is going to be another step up on that. The other Shadwell runners, well, Aldana for James Owen, obviously one of those, is ran 3 times this year, has been second on 2 of those occasions, including at Lingfield last time out when giving Mumayez a bit of a race. But you know, that's going to take another bit. It's going to need to take another big step forward to be getting involved. The visor goes on her for the first time, I noticed, and the other 2. Farasar down at the bottom, along with Cartier. Farasar obviously won earlier on in the season. I was a bit disappointed with her, if I'm honest. She ran all right at Wolverhampton on a handicap debut. I was slightly disappointed with her at Chepstow. She looked one of the first. Say one of the first strings. There was obviously quite a few that James had in that race. I think the trip will definitely help. I think coming up in stepping up in trip will probably help her. I think Jack Mitchell's a good jockey booking. It's interesting to see that Dane O'Neill rides Alajab. possibly to put the pace into the race. Maybe, I'm not sure. Not a great front runner's track, Doncaster. It has to be said, particularly on the round course. And the other horse down at the bottom, Cartier, for Phil Collington. We don't know a huge amount about, but has had a few runs in France, 0 from 4, I think, in France when I checked. And she is going to need to step up on what she's shown out there, really. So got an unusual mix this year. I mean, I'm glad we've got 9, but it's got quite a slightly unusual shape to it, with 2 of them being a long way clear on the figures.
Well, it's quite an open race, isn't it, really? Because it's a race for the UK. It's a race for third place, really. So, Stephen, what did you think of the other horses?
Yeah, like Gary's kind of alluded to, really, there's not a lot. I mean, on ratings, there might be a little bit that separates a few of them, but when you kind of pick holes through their form, you could probably argue that they are much of a muchness, really. And that includes Ortar, who we've obviously spoken about. There's grounds for her improving on her rating of 67. Obviously not long with James Owen being the primary reason, and her Chepstow form has been made to look pretty good, with obviously Mazuna running so well at Haydock last week. She is worse off at the weights with the likes of Farasar, but for all her form figures are fairly unflattering, I think she can certainly improve. Katia was no great shakes in France, and obviously that's one of the primary reasons why she has moved over to England. But she's only had 4 starts, and one of those runs would give her some sort of respect in this. Algani didn't show anything really, did he, last week at Haydock, allowing for the company that he was keeping. He was the first off the bridle and obviously failed to beat a horse home. So hard to draw too many positives from that. And Alajab, similarly, I think will probably improve a lot mentally for that run. You could see his antics down at the start, and it was his fault why we didn't get to see the race live on Racing UK, because they're all set to show it, and then he was pretty reluctant to go into the stalls. But having won on debut, you could do no more than that, and obviously Mumiez has boosted that form subsequently. So Alajab, whilst he wasn't the first string at Haydock last week, he does appear to be the first string this week. So I'd expect a better performance from him. And as the jockey booking suggests, he is probably the pick of the Shadwell battalion. But wouldn't be necessarily surprised if any of them emerged on top of that particular battle. Although, as you've already alluded to, it will be a battle to finish third, I think.
Alajab apparently did a stalls test at Chelmsford last night, and bearing in mind he's been declared, one assumes he passed with flying colours. So one would hope that he'll behave himself when he arrives at Town Moor on Saturday. Quick word about Katia, only because Katia is a first foal out of a horse called Towson, who won the first ever Arabian race that I sponsored back in, 2012, I think it was. Towson absolutely loved rattling quick ground, as I'm sure Gary will remember. And if we do have very quick ground at Doncaster, that might play to her strengths a bit. Although the one time she showed some form in France, she was third to a horse called Mujazif, who is one of Mr. Janou's first winners. He went on to win a Group 2, the 3-year-old Breeders' Challenge for colts last autumn. So there's a sliver of form in there, but that wasn't a bad race where she finished first. But obviously, she hasn't shown much since, which is obviously, as you alluded to, why she's over here in this country.
Yeah, and she was entered. I think she's been in England a while. She was entered last week and had a couple of entries, so that shouldn't be too much of an issue. Obviously, in receipt of a bit of weight as well, being one of 4 fillies in the race. But yeah, she'll need to improve a good deal to even finish third, I would say. That rating of 87 is probably one that's on the slide, and based on one performance back in France. The only other one we've not really mentioned is Sahis, who boasts a very similar rating to Ortar, and he's only had the 3 starts, and kind of his run either side of winning a handicap off the mark of 66 at Chelmsford have probably been a little bit too bad to be true. Last time at Doncaster was well beaten behind Ab Carey, and you never know, the sort of experience of being in a big field that day on the wide open expanses of Doncaster might just sharpen him up. But you're only running one derby, these 4-year-olds, so fair play to a good few of these for having a crack at it.
He's been gelded, hasn't he, since we
Yeah.
last saw him? So that's something to perhaps bear in mind. But yeah, that previous run, obviously it came here at the track, so that's always going to make you a little bit wary, isn't it? But it was just a little bit too bad to be true on what would seem on, a fairly promising, a promising enough debut at Wolverhampton, where obviously he finished behind Farasar and Aldana. But then that win at Chelmsford, in a sort of run-of-the-mill handicap, but I liked how he did that race. Went through that race. With you mentioned the ground there. I mean, obviously they broke the track record in one of the races there. We're recording this on Thursday, on the opening day of the meeting. The track record went in the one of the 5 furlong races, I think, didn't it? So it's fairly quick there at the moment. I'm not sure if there are plans to water. I think there might be a smidge of rain around, but conditions are probably still going to be, it's going to take a huge amount of rain to change that. And
a good talking point, because of course 2 of the horses which are entered here ran on rattling quick ground at Haydock last Saturday, and which is a race that you commentated on. Speaking to Tom Marquand after Bayan Athbar's win in the race, he did say it's probably, although it says good to firm, he said it really is some of the quickest ground I've ridden on this year. So that's something to bear in mind, and possibly it's a fair comment that maybe Alajab and Algani just didn't let themselves down and didn't really enjoy it at all. But obviously, Gary, you were there. Your thoughts on Bayan Athbar's win in the Sheikh Fatima Cup?
I thought a lot of them didn't particularly look as though they were enjoying the ground or probably letting themselves down and stride on it properly, particularly the winner, actually. I think she won despite that. She also obviously, didn't have the clearest of passages through on more than one occasion. And it was kind of messy in the fact that when they turned for home, there were quite a few of them that sort of got in each other's way on more than one occasion, really. But despite not completely getting a clear passage through, she quickened up well. She's got the job done. Be interesting to see sort of what kind of targets. I didn't speak to Phil afterwards, you did, but be interesting to see what kind of targets they have with her now, whether they'd be tempted. I mean, looking at her action, it to me looks like a proper dirt action, and an action that would be very effective on dirt. I think she got away with the quick grounds on last Saturday. I thought she was hating it personally, but she was climbing a bit as well. But her talent got her through. She's improving. Okay, on the face of it, she's only just managed to beat horses both rated in the 80s, albeit both of those, got a rise in the weights on the back of those decent runs. But I think she won despite circumstances not being in her favour. And as I said, the way that some of them sort of kept getting in each other's way a little bit and rolled around a little bit, it was quite messy, really, wasn't it, down the home straight? But despite those things, it's only a 4th career start or 5th career start. 5th career start, wasn't it? She's won despite those things. So where she goes next, it'll be interesting. But again, I should imagine a step up in grade perhaps beckons again now. And whether it's a return to Saudi or not, I'm sure you'll have a better idea than I will, because you spoke to Phil after.
Yeah, Phil, I can see that Phil's clearly got it in his mind that a little break wouldn't be a bad thing for her. She's had 2 hard races, in a very short space of time on the back of breaking her maiden. And although obviously she's currently unbeaten in Europe this year, it certainly, you could certainly see he was leaning towards giving her a bit of a break. There are all sorts of opportunities for her. They've raced in the race in Italy quite a few times with other Athbar horses, so that got a mention. And as you say, they've got big races out in Saudi, and of course there's also the dual crown. So I think it's a case of take her home, see what happens, and see what Athbar Stud thinks will be her next best target.
Yeah, I say lots of options for her now, and I'm sure Connections will have a sort of firmer plan perhaps after that next run where they can go. So yeah, I think she's quite talented, and I think she's going to end up a good bit better than the current mark that she's got. But they can either go one or two ways at this stage of their careers, can't she? Hopefully, mentally, she keeps it all together, because I think she's got a fair old engine, and I think she showed it with that turn of foot on ground that I thought she was absolutely hating, to be honest.
Yeah, and I think, fair play to Tom Marquand. I think he gave her an absolutely brilliant ride. I think there would be 1 or 2 jockeys who might have given up and just let her run on and finish probably about 5th, because she got stopped and had to duck and dive, as you say, all the way through. So I think he gave her an absolutely brilliant ride. It's interesting that that's his second win for the Athbar stud. He of course won on Shake Rock, about 6 years ago, I think, at the Newbury race, which was his first win on an Arabian. And no, I think he gave her an absolutely brilliant ride, and fair play to him. That was a key part of the success on Saturday. Stephen, I noticed you've actually, you've held her yet again on 100. Obviously, I think, with a clear run, she might have gone on a bit further. What are your thoughts as to the race?
Yeah, it's just tough. I mean, I know the owners want probably a higher rating so they can run in the higher ratings. I think they've got in the higher races. Sorry, I think they do have aspirations of running her at the ARH meeting. Talking to Tiger O'Shea the other day about her, and he incidentally couldn't ride because it was his son's first Holy Communion, so that's why he wasn't on board. We did wonder why. So look, the problem is the quality of opposition that she's coming up against more than anything. For all that we can allow Mizuna a little bit of improvement and Abaya Athbar back in third, returning to something like her best. It was just never a race conducive to producing a big performance for all the reasons that Gary's outlined, and I guess the firm ground was the main one. But she is winning her races. She won it with a £5 penalty on Saturday. Obviously, she was in receipt of the fillies allowance, but the £5 took her to carry in the top weight, and it's just impossible to sort of kind of drag the horses out a bit. I've tried to spread them out as much as I can to ensure that the quality has risen to the top. But we're still in an age where group races are protected in terms of standard maintained, which is probably a good job for the couple of group races that we've had recently. And obviously a lack of international competition is preventing that as well. So there's probably, as Gary said, little doubt that she is better than 100 mark, but as things stand, she's actually run to 96 on both of her wins so far. But the rating of 100 does allow for the little bit that she's had in hand. So not the right circumstances for her to be expressing her natural ability, I would say.
But certainly she looks like a horse to follow, and I understand that she had quite a few problems as a foal, development wise, and I think it's a real testament to the people at Athbar Stud who looked after her in her early years, and also the patience to let her develop in her own time. She certainly looks an attractive filly, and she did try very hard in a situation where she didn't really look to be enjoying the ground that much. So Tom did say afterwards that he felt that she certainly would have enjoyed a bit more ease given the choice, but much in the same vein as Taz said after she won at Newbury, she's got a lot of class, and I think that probably saw her through there as well.
Yeah, I did, and he probably learnt a bit as well coming through horses at Haydock, where she came around them at Newbury. And I know owners can get a touch impatient when they know they've got a horse that's flying and in form and they want to run in all the best races, but it probably wouldn't be the hugest negative if she was to have to wait for those sort of options and come back as a 6-year-old next year and running them. So the two victories she's picked up in England will serve her well. And if she does go into a much higher grade next time, then that will give us a better indication as to how good she is. Just as a kind of a side note, there are several of the beaten horses from Haydock who are, I think, entered in a listed race in Sweden upcoming reasonably shortly in the next few weeks. So if they can perform well out there, then that might give us a better guide as to how good the winner is here. And
well, thank you very much for your input, guys. And thank you to Stephen.
Cheers, Debbie.
And thank you to Gary. Obviously, we'll see you on Saturday at Doncaster.
Yeah, busy day. Looking forward to being there on St. Leger Day again.
Absolutely, and we'll review the race and look ahead to our last two handicaps of the season in the coming week. Thanks very much.